To item 11, now on pages 49 to 145, tree planting and biodiversity management. Again, I look to you, Councillor Dunn, to move this paper.
Thank you again, Chair. I do like to have my reports coming in twos, it seems, and having managed to time the EV report for World EV Day, I missed this one time very shortly after COP26 commitments to end reverse deforestation. This report on tree planting and biodiversity. Serendipity is my middle name. I've said in the past that in many ways what I sought to achieve as a portfolio model for environment is building on what the previous administration achieved and where possible going further. So in the spirit of recognising where there's cross-party agreement, let me begin by again recognising the party opposite for having sought to plant large numbers of trees in Harlow and having initiated the planting of wildflower strips which bloom so beautifully this past summer and brighten the town. And I'm pleased to confirm that we will be doubling the number of wildflower strips and that we have secured funding through the government's local authority treescape fund for a winter tree planting programme. And as a result, every ward in Harlow will see new trees planted, with 3 large planting sites and 40 already mature trees to be planted elsewhere across the town. And we'll be planting a sweet gum in Larkswood, limes in Great Plum Tree, a fascination birch behind Barley Croft, and in little Parsman Hare Street, I hope the councillors Duncan and Vince will enjoy the red maple October glory that we'll be planting in Rycroft. I suppose some of us may be trying to get a blue blossoming May glory as well, but so alongside tree planting work in Palmswood and the Town Park, and I must congratulate volunteers at both for their Green Flag Awards and at Harlow Museum as well. We will be planting over 2,000 trees this year, and I'll be coming back to that number later on. Where this report aims to go further is in recognising that despite these efforts and good intentions, there is still a long way to go on better managing Harlow's green assets and Sir Frederick Gibbert's great green legacy, which we all enjoy today. This report sets out our intention to develop both a long-term tree planting target over the coming months, and informed by work by the Woodland Trust, who I've been pleased to speak to about this, and to set out a strategic approach to how we manage and improve biodiversity in the town. We are considering this report against the backdrop of COP26 and the challenge of climate change, but must also not lose sight of the fact that we're also going through the 6th mass extinction event, something from which Harlow is not immune. And I know I'm not alone in being concerned about the impact potential future developments around Harlow could have on our already stressed natural environment. Harlow should aspire to play its own role in addressing biodiversity loss through our own policies and the decisions that are made in this chamber. The report makes reference to the government's landmark environment bill, and its targets for improving biodiversity, and my cabinet colleague, the portfolio holder for strategic growth, will have more to say to this at next month's cabinet through the open spaces document. So we should look to understand fully what the picture is here in Harlow and how we can play our part on biodiversity. To come back to that point about numbers, to preempt questions that may be asked about it. Some may question why we're planting 2,000 trees versus, say, 5,000. And one of the most significant elements of the funding that we have secured is that it covers 3 years of maintenance costs and has a survival target of 75%. We heard the opposition, of course, last week, full council talk about the survival target for their 5,000 trees, which was, as I understand it, 30%. A target that has been met just about after intensive emergency works to the plantation site at Pear Tree Mead. So overall, it is therefore likely that of the trees planted this winter, approximately the same number will survive as compared to the 5,000 that were planted, the vast majority of which unfortunately have not survived. So on that note, I do welcome this report and the carefully planned steps it sets out to make Harlow greener and more biodiverse. Thank you, Chair.
Before we go to questions, I see a second for this report. Thank you, Councillor Swords. Questions? Councillor Durkin, then Councillor Guinness.
Sorry, I have 2 questions, if I may, and I'm struggling to find it in the report. We have a number of small forests forests in and around Harlow, and I'm particularly referring to Latin Common Forest, which unfortunately has been left over a number of years. Now, I am aware that we used to use volunteers to clear some of the pathways, but it is an environmental area where we do have wild deer, and also we have a lot of dog walkers who do pick up their poo. I was just wondering, could you identify whether or not these sorts of woods would be included? And my second question was that the former leader of the council, Mark Ingle, was very interested in hedgerows as well as developing trees. There was an initiative to try to develop hedges, which again, that helped small wildlife, birds, insects, etc. And I was wondering whether or not that was part of the initiative as well. Thank you.
Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Durkin. I think there's a comprehensive list of all the areas that are under active management under the Woodland Management Appendix. If Latin Forest isn't in there, then that would suggest it isn't being maintained. And that is something that I wish to explore further with officers. There are other sites, Councillor David Carter's raised the G Alpine Park, for example, where, as I say in the comments I've made, there's a lot more that one needs to do. There are lots of sites where one would hope to do more to manage those sites. Hedges isn't something that's considered in this report, but it is an important point. I'd be more than happy to engage with that point, and of course through HTS as well, who have an important role to maintain our hedges.
Thank you, Councillor Van. Councillor Durkin, are you finished with your questions?
Oh yeah.
Don't
encourage me.
Councillor Vince there. And then I'll come to Councillor David.
You've got too much.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Chair. So yeah, interesting. The points you made about obviously the traditional 30% success rate in planting trees, and this is not just I made that number up. It's come from the experts. But I just wondered, out of interest, and I read a bit about 75% with really just genuinely interest. Do you know kind of how they're going to ensure that there's going to be such a success rate of trees? Because talking to experts on this, 30% is quite normal when you're planting a large amount of trees.
We do indeed. Councillor Van.
Thank you. I don't think 30% is, the conversations I've had with officers don't reflect that 30% is the target we aim for. I mean, we should understand that 5,000 trees were planted. There were some significant challenges. The pandemic, obviously, the weather was challenging. The site of East Park, which we're going to revisit, there have been a lot of lessons learned about the site and the way in which it was planted, and the survival rate there is at or around 10% survival rate, which is clearly very low. There are steps that have been identified that should make a significant difference when we revisit that site. But the funding is there to maintain, to do the maintenance work. If you plant an immature whip, and lots of them, some will die. A good success rate is around that 70 to 80%. That is where, with active management, you should be aiming for. The funding that we've secured from the local authority fund aims for that because it's achievable. By going out there and doing the management of these sites with that funding, and that is an entirely achievable target, and indeed at Pear Tree Mead, where that approach does seem to have been favoured, that is approximately, I don't know the exact survival rate there, but I think it is ballpark 70-75%. So we've shown that we can do it in Harlow if we put our minds to it and maintain these sites, rather than just planting them and leaving them.
Councillor Vince, do you have any supplementary?
Yeah, just interesting with 30% of 5,000 the same as 75% of 2,000. I thought that was the right choice. So just in terms of protection of trees, and I did mention at the last, sorry, I can't get the maths in, at the last council meeting there was an issue with some of the trees in Sunders, and I know Andrew's not here to answer the question. I know Andrew has dealt with that problem. I know HSS have responded, so I'm not going to cast that. But I just thought moving forward, and there is a mention in page 54 about not using plastic guards and trying to move towards something that's more environment friendly, which obviously we all support. Is there any plans to look at fencing around trees as well and that sort of thing, just to ensure that we don't have any issues? Obviously that was a one-off issue that I recognise that won't happen again, I'm sure, but there are plenty of other ways that immature trees can get damaged that we might have to look at.
Councillor Dunn.
Thank you. For the benefit of other councillors, there was an incident at the site in Somers where HTS are planting, I believe, another 200 trees to make good and go beyond any damage that has been caused. And I have to commend them on having taken that step. Yes. It's not an isolated incident, actually. I think there was a problem at Pear Tree Mead, not a council employee, but it's a fair point well made. There are some fencing posts knocking around Pond Wood from the Ballasiosis site. Not sure how much support I'd get for saying I want to see them all over Sunders Walk, but that is something that may need to be considered depending on the locations. Although I think you do well to get a large vehicle to some of the sites that are being considered that are going to be hosting these sites, so hopefully it won't be necessary.
Just got 2 more, Chair. Again, I appreciate it's probably not an ancient woodland, although it does seem pretty good when we walk through it every morning. But there's no mention of rectory wood on this particular report, and there's some that lives in this my ward and I walk through it every day. And I am concerned about its upkeep, particularly some of the trees that are going to come down, and I won't go into the history of it. But just wondered if this is going to be, considered as well, because it just wasn't in the report. That was all.
Well, I apologise for specific woods. There are plenty of them around how they have been missed. I'm sure it's unintentional. If any councillor, and I say this to Councillor Liz, but to any councillor in this chamber or not attending today has a concern about the way in which green spaces are managed in there, well, please do raise them with me and with the responsible officers. We do have some very dedicated officers who work very hard on these matters, as I believe Councillor Liz knows and knows personally. So I'm sure that they're very keen to engage on rectory wood and any other wood that any councillor has a concern about.
I appreciate that, and you might be great last offering that, and it would be great if I could get to a conversation with you about that. It would be brilliant. Last question for me was, and I'm looking at Councillor Charles, because I know him and the late great Councillor Mason really bonded over this, but there was a real push to do more. We really pushed to make it into community activity, planting the trees. As I say, councils came along, we had the scouts along, we had family carers, all these sort of groups come along to do it. I guess the answer to this question is yes, but just to raise it with you. But I'm hoping that you're going to say yes, that this is really something that you're going to do moving forward with the next sort of tranche of planting.
Councillor Dunn.
The report makes clear the importance of volunteering to do this work.
Brilliant. I'm sorry, not just because it was going to read, but didn't associate, please forgive me. It was about the youth council as well, because they were doing planting an open pond before it became popular, so just to involve them as well. I didn't see them mention that was all.
I think youth councillors, anybody can be considered able to volunteer. So I hear that. I hear it. We could be here a long time when we start listening to various groups. So everyone's welcome to volunteer. All welcome. Take a tree each. Okay. Are there any more? Oh yes, Councillor David Carter. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. One of the items on this, on the grass leg, is Hawkenbury Meadow. The Hawkenbury Meadow, in the last couple of weeks in October, has been totally refurbished. The trees have been cut, the grass has been cut. It's a real pleasure to go down to Hawkenbury Meadow and walk round there. However, it's a bit late for this year. It's October, it's been cut down, they've done a beautiful job, but people are not going to use it there because it will become muddy and in the winter. During the earlier months, May, June, July, August, it was overrun, bushes all over the place, grass 5-6 feet high, absolutely unusual. What I would like to ask is that this will change around and maybe be looked at early in the year so people from Hawkenbury and the surrounding areas can use it during the summer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Councillor can answer that question. It's certainly a focus of this administration to ensure that our environment across Harlow is tip-top and that we get on things when we're able to within the legislation, because as you're well aware, certain things can't be cut back, hedges for particular in the summer, but where we can, we are going to get on it, and it's a major focus for this administration. I'm going to go to Councillor Gunn.
There's no need to come to me because Chair said everything needs to be said on appointment.
any further questions before we come to comments? I think I'm going to go to Councillor Edwards because I have a feeling Councillor Garnett will allow us to move into comment. Councillor Edwards.
This is a question. Page 64, in the Appendix C, where it's talking about grassland management. In the ultimate paragraph, it says, currently the council does not manage grassland areas in a traditional manner, which would have the most significant positive impact on biodiversity, largely because of the cost implications of this. Do we have any understanding of what the cost implications are, and has there been any sort of cost-benefit analysis done? That's just a statement. I don't know whether it would be a relatively small amount of money to address this, or whether we're talking about a huge amount of money.
Councillor Dunn.
I'm not aware of any specific costs that have been given on that. It's not something that this administration has as yet looked at. I assume that this comment may reflect officers having looked at previously, but I don't know.
Come back with a follow-on question. My question obviously is going to be, will can officers be asked to look at this and give a figure as to what that, what the cost implications are behind that statement?
That is something that I will take away in the talks.
Councillor Kite.
Thank you, Chairman. It is a question, actually. Under paragraph 17, which is part of the Old Gloucester Woodland, ancient woodlands, it talks about incomes, and it talks about on C, it says creation of sustainable woodland produce such as firewood and charcoal. Is charcoal good to produce? It's not CO2s?
Well, this must have escaped my net zero review from a couple of months ago. I don't think that the amount of charcoal that's being produced is substantial at Barnton Wood, and they do a great deal more for the environment, I think, that is positive than any negative output. So I commend them on their initiatives.
And if I may, because ancient woodland is actually managed woodland, any effects of material produced typically in this nature are net zero. So Councillor Chadwell. Any comments now? Lots of comments. Right, let's go with Councillor Durkin, and then with a big delay, so I'll have to come back short.
Thank you, Chair. I can't believe anybody wouldn't welcome this particular report, and I do know that a former councillor who may well be looking down on us down in Purton will be very proud, as this is part of his legacy for Harlow. I do welcome the initiative and the continuing initiative about wildflower planting, because I know myself and Shona Johnson had been campaigning for this for a number of years, and it took us a long time just to get to the pilot, so I'm absolutely delighted over those particular issues. I absolutely would share the congratulations that we need to give to the hundreds of volunteers that show more care to Harlow than perhaps others do. And again, it reflects very much to the criticism that the Cabinet Member for Regeneration made a few meetings ago, where he was very critical of Harlow when he said out of every window there was misery and despair. Well, I don't know what window he looks out of, but actually when you do look around the green areas, the tree areas, the planting, I believe Harlow is half full rather than half empty. And my final comment is I also believe in the nature reserve. A special thanks should also go to the charity ECO from the Foman family, who have worked tirelessly over many years, very quietly with great diligence, to build up a charity not only about recycling to change that, but actually putting their charity resources into things that matter, which is Pond and Wood and other areas. So absolutely, my final point would be, it's a bit like Latin Wood. It's actually also we need to work much closer with our partners, Epping Forest and East Herts, because there's nothing worse than if a person is travelling into Harlow and sees something, that's the immediate impression that they get from Harlow, about Harlow. But actually, if we have got green, sustainable planting, hedges, wildflowers, that actually makes people know that they want to live, they want to play, and they want to invest in Harlow as well. Thank you for allowing me to make those comments.
Councillor David Carter, you were speaking.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think we are very privileged to live in Harlow, with the trees all around the town, the roads that we drive down, covered in trees, bushes, grass verges, often large grass verges. And I believe this helps our lifestyle and well-being from an oxygen point of view, which people in areas like London unfortunately don't have. And what I would like to say regarding the grasslands, some of the grasslands around town, they were cut too late this year. When I say cut too late, they were cut in May. First cuts of them were in May. There was no cutting of those grasslands early on. Now, we don't take the grass away, we let the grass recycle itself. But if you cut it when it's 1 foot 6 inches long, it becomes thatch and it lays on the ground, and when the cutters come again, they just churn it up a bit more, and it becomes not able to be played or worked on, etc. If you cut it when it's small, it biodegrades into the ground and then replenishes itself through that system. So I'm hoping that we won't go back to starting the grass cutting in May, but we will do it at the first opportunities in March, like we did prior to last year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. I'm going to have Councillor Yates and Councillor Simon Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of comments very quickly. The first one is a little bit political, apologies, but page 54, it's nice to see a mention about getting rid of single-use plastic, something the last administration did achieve in response to the climate change emergency. There was some suggestion we didn't do anything, which is not true. That's the only bit I'm going to say. I will again reiterate, the massive amount of volunteers that came out, and I did want to particularly mention the Harlow Youth Council again because they were hugely involved in it, in planting those trees. And I think actually it was just a really, really good community activity. And I make the joke, but it was good to see councillors from different sides of the chamber working together to achieve something, and it was quite nice. It was nice to see, put it that way. So I have spoken to people about planting, and actually the 30% take-up rate actually isn't as bad as people suggest. However, I do welcome anything that council officers can do to increase the take-up rate, which is why I'm really interested and did ask that question. And again, I will say this. I did mention Rectory Wood specifically, and I appreciate that you can't mention every woodland in Harlow, but ultimately, as before we are anything else, before I'm dealing with the Labour group, before you guys are portfolio holders, the first thing we are ward councillors, aren't we? So as a ward councillor, I'm clearly going to ask questions about my ward and the woodland in my ward, and I do, generally, I'm not trying to catch up at two councillor, I'm really not, but I really thank you for your answers, and I really welcome, what I perceive as being a very genuine offer to engage me on that particular woodland and have some sort of dialogue on it, because I am concerned about it, and ultimately when it comes to trees, if you leave an issue, it gets bigger because it grows, doesn't it? So I welcome having sort of further conversation with you on that. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Simon Carter.
Thank you, Chair. I found the whole paper absolutely fascinating, really interesting, and a joy to read. Particularly Appendix E, the Parliament Wood Nature Reserve. I mean, the amount of stuff that's going on over there. There's the Alaskan chainsaw mill. The two are being cut down to the slow downs. And the special way in which they make charcoal, which are environmentally friendly because they don't release the air and smoke out the gases they use to burn to sustainable woodland produce fire with charcoal. In a retort, fire does not come into contact with the wood as it is sealed in the chamber, so the air cannot come into contact with it, which reduces pollution by about 75%. So even that is being addressed. We often talk about jewels in our crown. You know, part of the wood is clearly one of those. There's so much activity going on there, so much positive activity. You know, there's been reference to the volunteers who do a tremendous amount of there. There's also the green team. So it's, you know, it's a great report, being able to set out all that is going on. Hopefully there will be plans for the other woods that have been mentioned to tonight. I know there are a number of appendices which are not actually present in the report. You need to click on links to actually find them. There may well be something in there. But perhaps Councillor Gilbert find the time, or get one of the volunteers perhaps to find the time to find out the management plans for the other woods in Harlow. I think we will all appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey, Councillor Salt, would you indicate? Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, I was going to say much of what Simon just said, which is I found reading the Cabinet papers when I came across these 90 pages of reports and information about, I mean, it was like an oasis. It was joyous in the context of Cabinet papers, and such a delight and such a surprise. And you know, I really want to give a shout out, and I'm sure I'll have a lot of support for this, for Patrick Bailey, who is the officer, who is just such a good egg, who is behind so much of this. And I just think it's nice to reflect on the sort of two sides of the coin that we've had in the last two items. You know, we had the litter picking and the enforcement and the kind of, you know, and we have the glory and the joy of this item. And honestly, I just really want to say, it just put a smile on my face as I sat down to read the papers to find this oasis. So I fully endorse the report, and I'm so pleased to have had the chance to talk about it in the Chamber.
I'm going to go to Councillor Salt, and I'll move to Councillor Balfour. His comments before I finally sum up, as I've had no indicates to speak. Councillor Salt.
Well, much my thunder has already been stolen by Councillor Carter and Councillor Harvey, because it's probably, let's say, slightly one of the best reports I've read since being a member of council, because it is, you know, to see some of the truly incredible stuff that's going on. It's very heartening, and I've seen, you won't hear me too often in this chamber commend Mr. Rindle, but one of the fantastic things he did, that you can see in Pear Tree Mead and at the side of Longfield, the tree planting that survived, which adds great value to the area. And it, you know, as I said, truly fantastic report. I of course couldn't let Councillor Durkin get away with the slide yet, because I let him into a secret that after...
Oh, it wasn't slide.
Never is with you. After every council meeting, I then some poor folk does transcribe what I say. Because when I leave this chamber, I forget most of it, and I have to ensure that I'm accountable for what I've said. And I've just checked those since being a member. I've never used the word misery nor despair in this chamber, so perhaps his accuracy needs a bit of work. If you're a bit more accurate in this role, you may have had some more success, because the only misery I've probably seen sits over there. And there's certainly no misery or despair in this report, so I strongly commend it.
Or it may be that you can't remember what you say.
Councillor Durkin. Right. Councillor Gunn, before I sum up.
Well, I'm glad that the report has given so much joy to councillors across the chamber on all sides. And to reiterate what Councillor Harvey said, yes, Patrick Bailey, we've got some excellent officers working for the council in all service areas, and it's been a pleasure having Patrick within the environment portfolio area, who has done a huge amount of good for Harlow over many years. And there are many others who deserve credit for this, who go far, far beyond this chamber. Someone has caught my eye, I forgot to mention earlier, and she's looking at me right at my gaze. Her Majesty the Queen, I just want to quickly mention, pay tribute to her. And just to make it clear that what we will be doing with the tree planting this year is ensuring it is in line with the Queen's green canopy initiative, and the council is working on this with the Office of the Lord Lieutenant of Essex, and we're hoping to involve community groups and certainly one or two schools, hopefully, with that work as well. And since she's still staring at me, I thought I should mention that. Thank you.
Councillor Edwards.
Just a brief aside, I was there when the Queen planted a tree in 1957, so
Where was it?
it's important.
Well, a wonderful report. I'm very heartened by the comments that have gone around the room and some of the questions that have been put to portfolio owner. I'm particularly pleased around the work around single-use plastics, and I'm very excited about the work that the Woodland Trust are doing, and our commitment to try and implement some of the new technologies around that later on in the programme. It shows that it's a very rounded approach and not one-sided approach just to plant trees, but we're thinking of all the various aspects here. I'm particularly pleased that there's an emphasis on the maintenance and making sure that we're not biting off more than we can chew, and that there's enough funding here to maintain this and to get that very ambitious success rate there. And it won't be easy, but I'm very heartened by the ambitious target that's been set out in this paper. I echo the points around volunteers. Volunteers are critical to most things that council of ours will do, and I pay tribute to all of those that have been mentioned, ECHO, etc. I think this paper underlines and underscores this administration's commitment to net zero. Could have been very easy not to have embarked upon this, and there are many other pressing issues, but we recognise that the environment is one of the pressing issues of the day, and I pay testament to Councillor Gunn's efforts in this regard, and note his magnanimous thanks to all those that have gone before and have worked with him to get this to where it is, standing on the shoulders of giants, no doubt. I'm pleased that we've been able to sprinkle a little gold dust, and the Conservative administration has been able to provide an oasis for the administration here, and we intend to do that more and more often, cross-party support, and if you so wish, I can arrange for a membership card for the Conservative Party to be winning its way to council. I'm sure the membership form will sit and gather dust though, but I can do it digitally, so we save on the paper. A wonderful report. Thank all those concerned. Therefore, I move to the vote to take recommendations A through to D on this